Billionaire's daughter was blind, until an elderly black maid rubbed her eyes, and something impossible happened. A 12-year-old girl born blind opened her eyes one night inside a marble mansion and saw light for the very first time. Her father was one of the richest men in Georgia. Her healer was the maid he never noticed. The world called it a miracle, the doctors called it an accident. But the truth, what really happened inside that house, would shatter everything the Hale family believed about money, power, and faith. Picture this: a thunderstorm. A long driveway slick with rain. Inside, a little girl in silk pajamas stands by the window, her pale eyes searching for something she's never seen. "Daddy," she whispers, "what color is the sky?" Her father, Victor Hale, freezes. A man who could buy anything, except the one thing his daughter needed. He had spent over $3 million trying to restore her sight: surgeries, lasers, private hospitals in Boston and Tokyo. Nothing worked, and tonight he was out of hope. That's when the maid stepped forward, Mrs. Lila Washington, 67 years old, silver hair pulled tight in a bun, hands rough from decades of scrubbing floors. In her pocket, a small glass jar her grandmother once called sunlight cream. She whispered a few words, old words, and rubbed the ointment gently across Ava's eyes. What happened next, no one in that house could explain. The girl gasped, her head tilted toward the window. She said 4 words that made her father drop his coffee cup to the floor. "I can see light." Within days her vision began to return, little by little, until one afternoon she pointed at the blue of the swimming pool and called it by its color. Was it a miracle? Was it science in disguise? Or was it something the powerful man in that mansion didn't want the world to know? Because in the weeks that followed, headlines changed, cameras showed up, and the truth about what really happened inside that house turned into a national storm. Stay with me, because by the end of this story you'll have to decide for yourself, was this a miracle, or a cover-up? Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The night Ava Hale first saw light should have been a miracle shared quietly within a family. Instead, it became a headline that refused to die. By morning, whispers had already reached Atlanta's business district. "Something happened in the Hale mansion," they said. "The blind girl can see." Within hours, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a wildfire. Television vans parked outside the gates. Reporters camped beneath umbrellas. Every outlet wanted a statement from Victor Hale, the billionaire who built one of America's largest tech empires. But behind those gates, the story wasn't what the world thought. On one side, a father desperate to believe that his money had finally delivered what years of medicine could not. On the other, a maid who carried her grandmother's recipe in a cloth bag, a mixture of herbs, oil, and faith. Somewhere in between stood Ava, a child too young to understand that her healing had become a war of ownership. Why would a billionaire trust a remedy that never saw a clinical trial? Who documented the first signs of sight? Doctors, or a maid with ancestral knowledge? And if a cure truly happened, who tried to take the credit? But miracles have a way of leaving fingerprints. And when people started looking closely, what they found inside that mansion would raise more questions than anyone was ready to answer. Before the headlines, before the cameras, before the word miracle ever appeared on a screen, there was just a house, a father, and a child who had never seen a sunrise. Ava Hale was born with a condition doctors call optic nerve hypoplasia, a phrase that meant her eyes could move, but they could never truly see. Her world was texture and sound, a constant map of memory and rhythm. She learned life by feel: the cool edge of the marble staircase, the hum of the elevator at night, the way the house smelled different depending on who had been in it. She loved the piano. Her fingers found what her eyes couldn't, each key a color she could only imagine. To her, the world wasn't dark, it was different, but to her father, Victor Hale, difference felt like failure. He was 53, sharp, impatient, a man who had turned code and logistics into one of America's largest tech empires. Hale Innovations. His empire was data, measurable, predictable, controllable, and in that world everything could be fixed with the right algorithm. So when Ava was born blind, Victor treated it as another problem to solve. He called the best specialists, New York, Miami, Houston. Every time the answer was the same: "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale, there's nothing we can do." But he kept trying. He funded research, bought experimental devices, even invested in an AI-assisted vision therapy project in Boston. He told his board it was philanthropy, but the truth was it was desperation. Inside his office hung a single photo: Victor shaking hands with a neuro-ophthalmologist from Harvard. The caption read, "Innovation never sleeps." It was supposed to inspire his team. In time it became a quiet reminder of how much money couldn't buy. Ava didn't know any of this. She only knew that her father's voice changed when doctors came over, colder, tighter, as if hope itself had become an inconvenience. She'd wait for him to say goodnight, and sometimes he didn't. And so the child learned silence. But silence never lasts long in houses built to hide it. Lila Washington had cleaned houses all her life. Born in Atlanta's West End, raised by a grandmother midwife from Macon, she grew up believing that healing didn't start in hospitals, it started in homes. Her grandmother, Mama Ruth, kept a cabinet full of jars: sunleaf, lavender, camphor, honey, lemon balm. Everything God made, she used to say, He made for something. Layla had watched her treat neighbors with hands so gentle they calmed fever before the herbs even took hold. She never claimed magic. She just said love needed tools. Now at 67, Layla's life was simple. She went to church every Sunday, hummed hymns while she worked, and wrote recipes on index cards in careful cursive. Sunleaf plus lavender plus camphor, passed down for generations. When the Hale family advertised for a housekeeper to manage their newly renovated mansion in Buckhead, Lila didn't know she was walking into a story that would test everything she believed about healing and about herself. She only knew that she needed the job. But some jobs are not coincidences. The first time Lila saw Ava, the child was sitting in the hallway near the grand piano, tracing her fingers along the wall as if reading invisible letters. Miss Washington, the house manager, warned, "You're here to clean, not to socialize, and never touch Miss Ava." Lila nodded. She'd heard that tone before, the kind people used when they mistook caution for wisdom. But something about the girl stopped her. Maybe it was the way Ava tilted her head when she listened, or how she smiled at a sound instead of a face. The second morning, while dusting the banister, Lila began to hum softly, an old hymn her grandmother used to sing. To her surprise, a small voice joined in, off rhythm, but clear. It was Ava. She had found the tune without ever seeing the lips that sang it. "That's beautiful," Lila whispered. "I can't see you," Ava said, "but I know you're kind." That single sentence built a bridge no paycheck could erase. From that moment, every day Lila worked, Ava waited for her footsteps. She learned the sound of her shoes, the scent of her soap, the rhythm of her breathing. It was how she mapped the world. And for the first time in years, she laughed. Upstairs, Victor heard that laughter through the security feed and smiled to himself. "Therapy's working," he muttered, never once wondering who had truly given his daughter that joy. But Lila knew. She didn't see herself as a savior, only as a servant who had noticed something the rest of the world had missed: the difference between treating a body and healing a soul. And yet, even she couldn't explain what compelled her to do what she did next. Late one evening, while polishing the silver near the kitchen window, she looked toward the guesthouse garden, where her grandmother's recipe card sat tucked in her purse. The same mixture she had seen help neighbors regain strength after illness. She whispered a prayer, then quietly slipped a small glass jar into her pocket. It would be days before she used it, but when she did, the line between science and faith would blur forever. It happened late on a Thursday night. The rain had not stopped since dusk, and thunder rolled somewhere over Peachtree. The mansion was quiet, too quiet for a home that size. Most of the staff had gone, the security cameras blinked softly in their corners, and only 2 lights remained on, one in the hallway outside Ava's room, and one glowing faintly beneath her door. Lila stood there, hesitant. She wasn't supposed to be on this floor after 8 p.m., but rules have never stopped a heart that knows its time. She whispered, "Miss Ava, are you awake?" "I don't sleep much," the child said softly. "It's easier to think when the house is quiet." Lila stepped inside, careful not to wake the house. "May I show you a kind of light you can feel?" Ava tilted her head. "Light I can feel." Lila nodded, holding up the small jar. The contents shimmered faintly: lavender oil, sunleaf, and something she would never name aloud. "My grandmother used this for people who had forgotten what light feels like." Ava smiled. "I've never felt it before." "Then tonight, maybe you will." The woman dipped her fingers into the salve. A faint scent of herbs and honey filled the air. She rubbed the ointment gently over the child's eyelids, whispering a prayer no one else in that house would have understood. The sound of the storm dimmed. The hum of the house faded until there was only breathing. Ava's hands clenched around her blanket. "It's warm," she said quietly. "Like a candle behind my eyes." Lila's voice steadied. "That's your body remembering. Don't be afraid." Ava's face softened. For the first time in her life she felt something where nothing had ever been. A faint glow inside the darkness. Downstairs, Victor Hale signed off on emails to Tokyo. He didn't hear the prayer upstairs. He didn't hear the child whisper, "It's getting brighter." When Lila left the room that night, she didn't tell anyone. Some moments are too fragile for explanation. By morning, something had changed. Ava woke with a kind of quiet energy. She walked differently, turning her head as if sensing where the light came through the curtains. When her music therapist arrived, she pointed toward the window and said, "It feels warm there." The therapist froze. "You can tell where the sun is," Ava nodded. "It feels different from the rest of the room." Word spread quickly. Victor called Dr. Harrison, the family specialist, who arrived within the hour carrying portable scanners and charts. "Let's not get excited," the doctor said as he checked her pupils. "Sometimes children imagine progress. Their brains fill in gaps," but as he leaned forward, he noticed something strange. The muscles behind her eyelids fluttered, reacting faintly to light. The readings weren't normal, but they weren't static either. "Fascinating," he murmured. Victor stared at the data on the tablet. "Is it working? Is the treatment from Boston doing something?" "Perhaps," the doctor replied, uncertain, "or it could be coincidence." "We'll know more after the next session." "Coincidence," Victor repeated, half to himself, "or placebo." Lila, polishing the silver tray in the corner, didn't look up. She simply whispered, "Some lights start in the heart, sir." Victor ignored her. He was too busy trying to find a scientific explanation for what his daughter had just done. That afternoon, Ava followed the sunlight across the room, tracing it with her hands as it shifted on the floor. She stopped near the window, smiled, and said, "That's warm light, the rest is cool." Her words didn't fit any diagnosis, but they fit something older, something that didn't need a chart to prove itself. The next morning, Ava woke before anyone else. The staff found her standing at the top of the grand staircase, facing east. The curtains were open, and the first rays of sunrise had turned the marble floors gold. "Miss Lila," Ava called. "Yes, baby? That's where the sun comes in, isn't it? Right there." She pointed directly at the eastern window. Lila froze. No one had told her which direction was east. No one had told her where the window faced. "Yes," Lila whispered, "that's right." Victor overheard from the landing above. "Who told her that?" he demanded. Lila shook her head. "No one, sir." For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of the clock downstairs filled the silence. That afternoon, Dr. Harrison ran another test. The results were inconclusive. The equipment showed no structural change, no sudden regeneration, no scientific reason why Ava should be able to tell light from dark. But she could, and each day after, she grew more confident. She reached for objects with precision. She stopped counting steps when she moved. She smiled at the direction of light, like a flower turning toward the sun. That evening, when the house fell silent, Lila stood by the security monitor in the hall. The grainy black and white feed showed Ava at the top of the staircase again. The girl paused, tilted her head, and stepped down carefully, each movement deliberate, sure, steady. At the last step, she turned and looked straight toward the camera. The light from the chandelier flickered across her eyes. It was faint, but it was there. The first real spark of sight. By the end of that week, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a laboratory. Victor Hale didn't sleep. He doubled the security in Ava's wing, ordered new medical equipment, and scheduled back-to-back consultations with specialists from across the country. He told his investors he was close to a breakthrough. Within days, a team from a Boston research institute had flown in. They fitted Ava with a wearable retinal stimulator, a visor that pulsed gentle light against her eyelids, while cameras monitored every blink and movement. Document everything, Victor instructed. If it works, we publish. But the strange thing was this: Ava's progress didn't match the lab schedule. On days when the team surrounded her with machines and bright lights, she grew restless, tired, confused. But on evenings after Miss Lila's quiet shifts, when the cameras were off, when the house was still, something inside her came alive again. She started walking without assistance. She reached for things by instinct, and she began describing light not as a concept, but as an experience. Victor noticed the improvement, but refused to make the connection. "It's the blue light therapy," he told the doctor, "or the new stimulation pattern. Science is catching up." But the data told a different story. Every measurable gain, every small leap forward, happened after Lila's shifts, not during official sessions. The pattern was undeniable, but Victor would deny it anyway. The story spread beyond the mansion. A boutique clinic in downtown Atlanta claimed their neurostimulation device was responsible for Ava's unprecedented recovery. Their glossy brochure featured sleek silver goggles and glowing testimonials, reawakening sight through innovation. On social media, a viral clip from an influencer called it proof that AI-based brain training is changing lives. Another headline read, "Vision Bootcamp gives blind girl hope." None of them had ever met Ava. None of them mentioned Lila. In a city where progress was a product, everyone wanted a piece of the miracle. In a city that sells miracles, everyone wants a piece. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the truth stayed quiet, tucked between pages of an old notebook in Lila's nightstand. Lila had always kept records. Her grandmother taught her that healing should never rely on memory alone. The notebook was small, leather cover, corners worn soft with time. On each line, a date, a note, a small miracle. April 11th. Ava distinguished window from lamp. April 14th. Identified direction of sunlight. April 17th. Reached for red flower without prompting. Each entry written in blue ink, careful handwriting, each one signed with a cross. At Ava's request, Lila began taking photos, never of her eyes, only silhouettes. Ava near the piano. Ava tracing the shape of her father's face. Ava standing by the window, smiling into the light. Lila added them to the notebook. Quiet evidence of a change no scientist could explain. Across the hall, Victor's lab team kept their own logs, heart rate, eye movement, dosage charts. But the two sets of data didn't match. The clinic's records skipped days, fudged times, left gaps. Lila's notes were meticulous, consistent, irrefutable. If you compared them side by side, one thing became clear: the moments that mattered most weren't in the lab reports at all. They were written in a housekeeper's notebook. Rumors began to leak. A freelance journalist named Rebecca Monroe, who covered Atlanta's human interest stories, heard about a housekeeper with healing hands. She started digging. The deeper she looked, the more the story shifted from science to something older. A line of women passing down care when medicine refused them. An old photo surfaced. A black and white image of Lila's grandmother, Mama Ruth, standing in front of a small herb garden behind a church in Macon. On her lapel, an NAACP pin. Rebecca's next note to her editor read, "This isn't just a medical story, it's a Southern story. And Southern stories don't stay buried long. If you're still with us, tell us where you're watching from. Let's see who's still here. Drop beautiful or your city in the comments below." The following week, Victor decided to take control of the narrative. His communications team prepared a press presentation, a polished slideshow titled The Hale Vision Protocol. It credited the progress to cutting-edge neurotherapy developed by Hale Innovations in partnership with Boston Medical. Lila's name appeared nowhere. Cameras flashed. The press applauded. Victor smiled for the first time in weeks. "Hope," he told the reporters, "is the product of persistence and technology." Back home, Ava watched the press conference replay on a tablet. She turned to Lila and whispered, "It's brighter when you're here." Lila smiled gently. "That's because you're seeing with your heart, baby." Moments later, a notification flashed across Victor's phone, an anonymous email from an unverified address. The subject line read, "Who is applying unapproved substances to my child?" Victor's hand trembled as he stared at the screen. The secret was no longer just between them. It happened early the next morning. The air inside the Hale mansion was sharp with tension, the kind that makes even the walls listen. Victor stood in the kitchen, still in his suit from the night before, the anonymous email open on his phone. His hand shook as he scrolled through the attached photo. Lila's notebook, open on a page marked April 17th. Ava identified red flower from window. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, when Lila entered, carrying a tray of breakfast dishes. She paused, calm, eyes steady. "Seems you already found it. You've been keeping notes?" he asked, his voice rising. "You've been experimenting on my child." "No, sir," she said softly. "I've been caring for her." He slammed the phone down on the counter. "You think your folk remedies fixed her? You think your herbs did what trained specialists couldn't?" Lila reached into her apron and pulled out the small notebook. The cover was worn, corners bent from years of handling. She laid it gently between them. "If you don't believe me," she said, "believe the dates." He hesitated, then flipped through the pages. April 11th, Ava distinguished window from lamp. April 14th, pointed to direction of sunrise. April 17th, identified color red. Each line matched the clinical reports. Each entry was stamped and dated before the doctor's sessions even began. The truth settled in the room like a storm cloud. "The data you live by," the narrator says quietly, was now written in a housekeeper's hand. Victor stared at the pages, jaw tight, pride bruised. He had spent his life worshipping at the altar of data, and now it was being used against him by the very person he'd once told to stay invisible. "You're playing with fire," he whispered. "Maybe," Lila said, "but at least it's light." As word leaked beyond the mansion gates, the story took on a life of its own. Local reporters tracked down neighbors, church members, and anyone who knew Lila Washington. "Oh, Miss Lila," said one woman in a reenacted interview, standing outside a small brick church. "She made me a salve once when my cataracts were giving me trouble. Didn't cure me, but I could read my Bible again without a magnifier." Another man, a mechanic, recalled how she'd helped his mother after surgery. She just sat with her, hummed, rubbed her temples with some kind of oil, said it wasn't medicine, just comfort. But Mama said she slept through the pain that night. They weren't medical claims, just stories, but stories have a way of building patterns. A retired nurse, one of Lila's old friends from church, spoke to a local paper. Those women knew how to care for people when nobody else would. They didn't call it therapy or science, they called it love with a little knowledge. Their remedies weren't miracles, they were memory, passed from one generation of women to the next. What began as rumor started to sound like testimony. And once the public saw a pattern, it was only a matter of time before they started asking questions that no publicist could control. 2 days later, Victor decided to face the cameras. The press conference was held inside the marble foyer of the mansion. Banners displayed the words Hale Vision Protocol in bold silver letters. Reporters filled the room, microphones poised, cameras blinking red. Victor stepped to the podium, flanked by two men in lab coats. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind that once sold investors on billion-dollar ideas. Today, he announced, we celebrate a breakthrough in neurovisual restoration. My daughter's progress represents the future of medicine, where innovation meets perseverance. Applause rippled through the crowd, but not everyone was convinced. A hand went up from the back row, a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Mr. Hale, she said, there are claims that a member of your household staff has been applying an unapproved substance to your daughter's eyes. Is that true? The room fell silent. Victor froze. His eyes flickered toward the back of the room, where Miss Lila Washington stood, half hidden behind a column, her hands folded, calm but unafraid. Cameras pivoted toward her. Mr. Hale, the reporter pressed, did she play a role in your daughter's recovery? Victor's throat tightened. He forced a smile. Our success is the result of advanced technology, he said finally. We appreciate the dedication of all our staff, but this outcome belongs to science. The lie hung heavy in the air, and just like that, the truth became fuel for something much bigger. The next morning, the headline hit every major outlet, the hands that helped inside the Hale mansion. The article told everything. The late-night visits, the ointment, the notebook, the prayers. It quoted neighbors, church members, even snippets from the nurse's interview. It detailed the timeline of Ava's improvements and the discrepancies in the clinic's records. For the first time, the world heard the name Miss Lila Washington. Within hours, the internet exploded. Half the country called it a miracle, proof that faith heals. The other half called it dangerous, reckless, unverified, a threat to modern medicine. News anchors debated ethics. Talk shows argued over race, class, and the line between science and faith. Through it all, Lila stayed silent. She refused interviews, refused money, refused attention. She said only, "The child sees now, that's all that matters." But one voice cut through all the noise, Ava's. Sitting in her bedroom, her silhouette framed by sunlight, she agreed to a brief recorded statement for the press. Her voice was soft, steady, mature beyond her years. "I don't know what made me see," she said, "but I know I felt safe with Miss Lila. When she was near, the world felt brighter." Her words played on every major network. The camera froze on her face, eyes open, filled with light, before fading to black. And while the world celebrated, the real storm began behind closed doors. Hale Innovation sponsors called an emergency meeting. Investors demanded statements. Board members argued about damage control. The company that built its empire on certainty was now drowning in doubt. The board convened at noon the next day. By evening, Victor Hale would face the one question he couldn't answer: who really healed his daughter, science, or the hands he tried to ignore? The fallout came fast. Within 48 hours of the article's release, Hale Innovation's stock dropped 12%. Major investors backed out of pending deals. The Boston clinic that once called Victor a visionary partner released a statement distancing itself from unverified alternative methods. Victor's empire, built on certainty and control, was cracking. Every journalist wanted a quote. Every network wanted him on camera. His PR team prepared two statements. Statement 1: deny everything, call it misinformation, reassert faith in science. Statement 2: admit the truth, credit Miss Lila Washington, risk the brand. One choice would protect his reputation, the other would free him from the lie. For the first time in his life, Victor didn't know what to do. He sat in his office surrounded by silence, the same silence his daughter used to live in. Then, in that quiet, he heard something faint coming from upstairs. Ava's laughter. It was a sound he hadn't heard since the night she asked him, "Daddy, what color is the sky?" That's when he knew what he had to do. That Sunday morning, the doors of Mount Zion Baptist Church opened to a sight no one expected. Victor Hale, the billionaire who once refused to shake Lila's hand, walked down the aisle in a gray suit, carrying a small brown notebook. The congregation fell silent. Lila, seated near the front, turned in disbelief. Victor stood before the pastor, cleared his throat, and asked, "May I read something?" The pastor nodded. Victor opened the notebook and began to read aloud. April 11th, Ava distinguished window from lamp. April 14th, pointed to sunrise. April 17th, saw red. He stopped, voice trembling. "These words don't come from a scientist," he said. "They come from the woman who gave my daughter more hope than all my doctors combined. I came here today to say thank you, and to say I was wrong." For a long moment no one moved. Then, one by one, people began to stand, clapping softly, then louder, until the entire church filled with applause. Lila rose slowly, tears glinting in her eyes. She didn't speak, she just smiled, the kind of smile that holds a lifetime of grace. That morning, in a church built by faith and worn by years, the walls witnessed something few boardrooms ever had: humility. Days later, father and daughter walked together through Piedmont Park under the soft spring sunlight. Ava shielded her eyes with her hand and laughed. "It's too bright." Victor smiled. "That's what light feels like." She turned her face toward the sky. "It's blue, right?" He nodded, voice breaking. "Blue, baby, it's blue." The same question that once broke him now healed him. They sat together under the trees, a jar of Lila's sunleaf ointment resting in Ava's palm. For the first time, Victor didn't see a miracle to explain. He saw love, simple, stubborn, and strong enough to bring sight to the blind and peace to the proud. In the weeks that followed, Lila's notes circulated online, not as medical proof, but as inspiration. Doctors began referring to her approach as compassion protocols, small acts that bridged science and humanity: rest, touch, warmth, patience, song, and hope. People from across the country sent letters, not asking for her salve, but for her story. Because, in a world obsessed with data, one woman had reminded them that healing doesn't always start in a lab. Sometimes, it starts in a kitchen, with faith and care. If medicine begins with care, who gets to count the cure? The story of the Hale Mansion didn't end in scandal, it ended in something rarer: understanding. But not every story finds such peace. Because just as the world began to move on, another mystery emerged. One buried deep in a police evidence locker hundreds of miles away. And if you thought this miracle challenged science, wait until you hear about the key that reappeared in evidence 10 years later. Was justice really served or finally acknowledged? Some stories end with answers. Others end with questions that stay with you long after the credits fade. So tonight, we leave you with this: do you believe what happened in that house was a miracle, a method, or both? Should Victor have seen the truth sooner, or was fear the only way he knew to protect his heart? And whose work gets erased when a victory is finally claimed? The one who funds it, or the one whose hands make it possible? The story of Ava Hale and Miss Lila Washington isn't just about sight restored. It's about a lesson most of us spend our whole lives trying to learn: that power without compassion is blindness of another kind. If this story shook what you thought you knew about power and healing, our next film will take you someplace even harder to believe. A missing key, a cold case reopened, and a truth that waited 10 years to be found. Don't miss it. Subscribe for more true-life twists about truth, courage, and second chances. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes kindness can change outcomes. If you want more ideas like this, check out the video on screen next. It's one you won't forget. What's your take on this story? Comment below. I'm reading every single one, and if this message helped you see things differently, hit like, and send it to someone who needs a little light today. Because sometimes, the real miracle isn't what we see, it's who helps us see it.